Hello friends, how's it going? It's me, Betty Jean. In this video, I'm going to be continuing on with my series that I started a couple months back where I chat about eyeshadow palettes that I decluttered in the past. I've already done 2 videos in this series. This is the 3rd one. I've really been enjoying this series and you guys have really been enjoying this series. I've been enjoying walking down memory lane with you. It's fun just kind of reminiscing on old palettes that I used to think were top tier and now I look at it and it's so boring. It's funny to see how my tastes change. It's interesting hearing how your tastes have changed as well. I've loved hearing your opinions during this series. I don't even think this will be the last part of this series. I think we still have quite a ways to go. So again, if you end up enjoying this video, let me know and I will continue on with this series. Before we hop into the video though, I did of course film this look. It should already be up on my Instagram and TikTok by the time this video goes up. And let me just give you my jewelry details. My earrings today are from Spooky Doodle Club on Etsy and I believe this choker is from Shop Sun & Co. You can use my affiliate code BattyBean for 10% off. So yeah, without further ado, let's just hop in, walk down memory lane, and chat about some eyeshadow palettes that I've decluttered in the past. Let me do a little scooch so that we can fit some pictures on the screen. In case you're new to this video, basically what I've been doing is going back to like my old makeup collection videos and just kind of going in order that I see them and chatting about things that I've decluttered. So these aren't necessarily in declutter order of like the first thing I ever decluttered up until now, but just kind of the things that I see that I notice I've decluttered already. Ooh, kicking it off, the Violet Voss Rainbow Palette. This was actually a palette that I wanted off and on for a while and then finally bought it for myself. I think I finally bought it when I saw it in person at Sephora. I thought this was a dream. It was an all shimmer rainbow palette and I was like, I am never gonna need another colorful shimmer ever. Like I have all of them, which not at all. They're very just like basic shimmers and even the orange wasn't really orange. It was kind of like a peachy, bronzy shade. It was okay. It wasn't anything revolutionary and I did of course end up decluttering it at a point. I don't really reach for all shimmer palettes too often and if I'm going to, they need to have really special shimmers. Just like a range of rainbow shimmers isn't really gonna do it for me. They have to be very shifty or special, something like that. So yeah, I thought this was amazing, now not so much. Ooh, this one was one of my first palette regrets actually. This is the Violet Voss Flamingo palette, I believe is what it was called. It just did not do it for me. I loved my hashtag palette that I talked about in the last video in this series and I did end up really enjoying the rainbow palette for a while, but this one, it just didn't do it for me. The shadows were very lackluster. They were not pigmented for me. They were just very sheer and they didn't pack the punch that I wanted them to, which looking back, Violet Voss didn't have the most punchy eyeshadows, but especially compared to my hashtag palette, these ones just felt very muted. And I was sad because I wanted this to be a fun tropical summer palette, which looking at it now, it's very boring to me, but at the time I had my hopes very high up and I was sadly not very impressed. I think I only used it twice before I decided to give up on it. Ooh, the KVD Beauty Divine palette. Zane's mom actually bought me this as a gift. We were all just out shopping at a mall one day back in like 2018 or something like that. And maybe even 2017 actually, I don't remember, whenever this palette came out. And I actually really enjoyed this for a long time. The main reason I ended up decluttering this one was back when Kat was still like the head of the brand before she got removed from it. There was just a huge chunk of time where I was still holding on to some of the things that I had, but I felt weird showing any of it on camera. And then at a point I was just like, you know what, I don't want this just sitting here not getting used, so I'm gonna give it to a friend. So that's what I ended up doing. But I did really enjoy this one. I felt like the mattes were very pretty. I really liked the shimmers that were in this palette. It was just a very smoky, dark palette with like a green and blue pop. I thought this was really cool and I really enjoyed the looks I created with this one. Do I think it's anything revolutionary now? Not really, but it was cute for the time. Ooh, kicking it back to Morphe. We talked about a lot of Morphe in the last video. We are talking now about the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Vault collection. So this included 4 palettes. Bling Boss was a purple. I'm seeing if I can remember this just off the top of my head. Bling Boss was purple. Wow, I can't remember any of the other names. All I can remember is the Bling Boss. I think Dark Magic was the bluey green one. I'm gonna look it up. Armed and Gorgeous was the army green and mustard yellowy one. And Ring the Alarm was the kind of bronzy neutrally one. I actually really liked mine. There was a lot of controversy around this collection. People saying there were bad batches. Some people got good ones, some people got bad ones. Mine was never bad. I actually really enjoyed mine for quite a while. I ended up just decluttering them because I wasn't reaching for them anymore. Morphe just isn't really a brand that I use and support anymore, but I did like it at the time. I thought it was really pretty. I really liked the small, concise color stories, and I still think the idea of this collection was amazing. Instead of just doing like a giant 35 pan eyeshadow palette, I liked the individual smaller curated collection. I thought it was cute. Of course, the mustardy yellow Armed and Gorgeous one was my favorite, but the Bling Boss and Dark Magic came really close to it as well. I didn't use Ring the Alarm that much. I probably could have skipped on that palette initially, but I just bought the bundle to buy the bundle. And I did enjoy them for a little while. Another Morphe one. This was my all-time favorite Morphe palette. This was the Boss Mood palette. I loved those swampy, murky greens. I loved those purples. There were definitely some shades in here I didn't really care for. Like, there were a lot of kind of orangey browns and kind of like reddish tones that I didn't reach for too much, but I loved the purples and greens in this palette. This was a favorite for a while. Of course, I ended up decluttering it at a point. It's very large, and there's a lot of repetitive shades I wasn't really using, and I ended up finding things that I liked better with the colors that I was enjoying from this palette, but I did enjoy this one for quite a while. I think there was a period of time where this was my only Morphe palette still in my collection before I let it go, but yeah, this was a really cool release. It still could have been curated down a little bit more, like maybe cut it in half and still have the same vibe. I think that would have been better, but I did like this for a while. Suva Beauty, this was the Block Party palette. This one was okay. I feel like when I first saw it, like the color story is cute. It's fun. It's a little weird, a little chaotic of a color story. Like, it's not super seamless, but I kind of like chaotic color stories sometimes where it's just randomness. But I do feel like actually applying the colors, the mattes that they chose versus the shimmers they chose, it can be kind of hard to create concise looks with this. I don't know. It wasn't horrible, and the formula was fine enough, but it just wasn't really, I don't know, it just wasn't really doing it for me at the end. Ooh, we got another ABH palette. I've talked about lots of ABH palettes in the other two videos. We are on the Riviera palette. This is one that I definitely could have just skipped on. Like, I want to start by saying it wasn't a bad palette, but I didn't need it. And when they first announced it, I told myself I'm not going to get that palette. Like, I don't need it. It's mostly just like neutrals with some pops of color. The pops of color were of course appealing. I loved that bright pink and bright purple that were in there, but I told myself I wasn't gonna do it. And then before it launched, the people that got it in PR kept putting out such beautiful looks with this palette, and I got suckered in. I bought it at Ulta in person the day it launched, and I played with it quite a few times, but kind of after I got like the looks I wanted to do out of my system, I was kind of bored of it. I didn't really feel the need to keep it around. I should have just like done purpley pinky looks with what I had in my collection to satisfy that urge. I'm glad that I'm better now. Like, if I don't feel that like head over heels in love with something kind of feeling with a palette now, I'm usually good to skip on it, but still around like the 2018, 2019 era, I still could have been persuaded. Yeah, I probably could have passed on this one. All right, some Lunatic Cosmetic Labs palettes. They sent me a little PR package a while back. It's the only PR package I've ever gotten from them. And it included 3 eyeshadow palettes, and not my favorite. I'll be honest with you. Let me pull up the website because I don't even remember what the names of these are. I just see a picture screenshotted in front of me. So let's start with the Vampire palette. This is just an all shimmer palette. It had just kind of 2 light highlighty shades, a bronzy shade, kind of a deep plummy brown, and then a black. Again, I don't really reach for all shimmer palettes too often unless it's very special. And these shades just weren't very special. The quality of the eyeshadows is just it's very subpar. It's nothing that special. The other ones aren't even on the website anymore. That's the only one still available. Let's see. Okay, this is the Supernatural one. This was just kind of like mauve-y neutrals. It wasn't anything special. It was just kind of a gradient from light to dark. Nothing revolutionary. The packaging on these is so cute, and I almost kept them just for the packaging, but I did end up just giving these to a friend because I knew the insides weren't appealing to me anymore. And then the Elvira palette. This one's cuter in the sense that at least it's a little bit more of a creative color story. It was very smoky and then had a pop of red and blue. That blue was horrible. Patch City. It was kind of like a baby blue, and it didn't want to stick to anything. It was so hard to work with. Very chalky formula. Overall, the quality of these palettes were not good. So yeah, they were hard to give up because I loved the packaging, but easy to give up at the same time. Next up from ColourPop, this is the Main Squeeze palette. This is one of the original 9-pan monochromatic palettes. Like, this was one of the first ones to come out. Not the first, but one of them. It was part of the beginning stages of that. I enjoyed this one for a little while, but This one felt too monochromatic to me. They've gotten better with their monochromatic palettes in the sense that like they add a lot more depth and dimension in different undertones to kind of make it more unique. With this particular palette, the mattes especially, they all kind of tended to look the same on the lid no matter what you did. So I just felt like I could only do very few things with this palette, and it just didn't make me super excited. It wasn't bad. The quality was fine, normal ColourPop quality, but it just wasn't inspiring to me anymore. So I passed this one to a friend. And kind of same with this one. This is the Just My Luck palette. I was really excited about this one and I did really enjoy it. The shimmers in particular, I really enjoyed. But again, the mattes could all kind of tend to look the same depending on what you did. It was very easy for them to just blend together as one, and not in a good way, like in a they just look the same on the lid kind of way. It just didn't have that range of undertones that I was looking for that they kind of do now. This one was okay. I did love the shimmers though. The shimmers were beautiful. BH Cosmetics, this is the Color Festival palette. This was, I believe, their second year doing like a festival eyeshadow palette. The Weekend Festival the year prior was one of my favorite palettes for a while. So then the next year when the Color Festival came out, I was super excited, but this one just did not end up being my favorite. Honestly, I think the color of the palette itself kind of suckered me in because it was that bright chartreusey lime green, and I really did like that limey chartreusey shade in there, although that shade in particular didn't perform that well. This was a very shimmer heavy palette and I didn't really realize that until I was playing with it. Like all of those dark shades on the side over there, all shimmers I believe. It was very hard to deepen up a look. The mattes were all very light. It was hard for me to create a variety of looks I found. I really don't like when the darkest shades in a palette are shimmers. Like if you're gonna have a really dark shimmer, there really needs to be a dark matte to go with it in my personal opinion. I find it's just easier to create things. And I just like having deeper mattes to create different looks because then you can do light things, but you can also do dark and smoky things. This palette I just didn't have the funnest time with, so yeah. Next up from Alter Ego, this is the Daydream palette. This is a dupe for, I believe, the Huda Beauty New Nudes palette. I could be mistaken because I'm not that familiar with Huda Beauty's palettes, but I think it was that. This one was okay. This is actually the only Alter Ego palette I've decluttered because I love Alter Ego's formula. This one, I don't play with mauve colors that often. This used to be my thing heavily in like 2016, 2017, even 2018, I loved mauves. I thought it was like the prettiest thing you could do as far as neutrals go. I was just kind of getting bored with it around this time in my life. And plus there were two pressed glitters in here and pressed glitters are not my favorite thing. So yeah, I just ended up deciding I didn't need this one in my collection. It wasn't a bad palette by any means, but it just wasn't for me anymore. Let's do a few more. Let's go over some more ColourPop. Let's see. The ColourPop Making Mauve. What is the Making Mauves palette? I don't even remember this. Oh, I remember this one. So one of the shimmers, actually, they ended up sending me, like my palette had the same shimmer twice instead of the third shimmer. So, I mean, that kind of took away one of the shades for me. Again, this isn't a bad palette, it's cute, but like I just mentioned with that Alter Ego palette, mauves just weren't really my thing anymore. This was just a pretty kind of mauve-y neutrals, little glamorous, airy, simple kind of palette, but it wasn't really what I needed anymore. Ooh, the ColourPop All That palette. This one I almost didn't declutter, and I'm not mad that I decluttered it. I don't think I needed to keep it in my life anymore. Basically, this palette was a reddish, smoky neutrals palette. To me, this was like the perfect kind of date night Valentine's Day palette because it could get very vampy and dark. There were two pressed glitters in here, which wasn't my favorite thing, but I did enjoy the tones. It just got to the point where I just felt like I wasn't really reaching for this one too much, and I had other things in my collection I was reaching for more than this one. But this wasn't like a bad palette by any means. I just didn't need it anymore. Ooh, OMFG Cosmetics. Their palettes weren't bad. The quality just didn't blow me away insanely, but it wasn't horrible. I never had like patchiness issues or anything. It was mostly just like the shimmers were more on the safer, like softer side. They weren't anything super bam. And the mattes could only, I don't know. The color stories were just not always my thing. So this was the Kush palette, and overall I did like the color story, but again, the shimmers were just very lackluster. They were just kind of like almost a satiny texture. They weren't very sparkly or metallic or anything. It was just a very soft shimmer, barely any shine or shiftiness. I used it a couple times. It just wasn't blowing me away enough to keep it kicking around. And then the Fall Vibes palettes. This one, actually looking back, I feel like this should have been deeper for it to really be fall vibes. To me, this is more summery. Again, it was mostly just the shimmers that kind of did it for me. They just weren't enough for me to want to keep playing with. I do feel like the ratio of matte to shimmers was really pretty, and I kind of like how they laid it out. Like the two corners were a matte gray and a silver gray, and then the other two corners were a matte green and a silver green, and then you have the two purples and the two pinks. It all kind of flows together really nicely, but it just wasn't really for me. That's all I can really say. Not a horrible palette, not a horrible brand or anything. It's just, it wasn't doing enough for me. Next up, let's talk about the Makeup Revolution Haunted House palette. This was actually a gift, and I was so grateful for this gift. It was so cute. It wasn't really one that was on my radar, but I was happy to find it. The packaging was cute. It had a big haunted house on the front, and the insides were pretty. The shimmers actually pleasantly surprised me. They weren't crazy metallic or glitzy, but they definitely had more pigmentation and more just oomph to them, especially way more than the OMFG palette. And the mattes were nice. We had a good range of depth. We had bright pops of color in here. It was cute. I got some fun use out of it, but at a point I just decided these weren't really the tones I was going for, and they're still not really the tones I go for anymore, especially because it's very neutral heavy. I did like that it got very smoky, but I just don't really play with the warm tone neutrally aspect very much, so I did end up gifting this one to a friend so it could have a better home and actually get more use, but this was fun for a little while, and it was my first and only time using Makeup Revolution's eyeshadows. Let's see, let's go to Nomad Cosmetics. I've kept almost everything that I've ever gotten from Nomad, but there are two quads that I ended up giving to a friend. So these are the Malibu and Encinitas quads. These were from their like little California surfing collection, and they're very cute in theory. I liked the packaging. They had kind of a canvasy feel, and the little surfboard on top kind of felt more woody. These are cute, but they just didn't like blow me away, and I don't reach for quads too often. Usually for me to be compelled to reach for something, it needs to be at least a 5-pan palette, but I also don't like super large palettes. Quads I just tend to forget about. They get a little bit lost for me unless they're full of like really special shades. And these were cute, just like quick on the go, easy looks to create, but they just weren't doing it for me anymore, so I ended up passing these to a friend. Let's talk about Give Me Glow. That's another brand where I've kept everything that I've ever gotten for the most part, but this was a quad that I definitely could have skipped on. I got suckered in for sure. I literally can't even find a picture of this, but it was, I'll find a picture to insert here, but it was basically, it was called the Blizzard quad, and it was just 4 shadows in a little palette. You probably could have bought them individually. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if they're available anymore. It was a light blue matte, a dark blue matte, a shimmer blue, and a pressed glitter blue. And I don't really buy things with pressed glitters. I'm a little more lenient with it now. If like everything else about a palette screams to me and there's one pressed glitter, sometimes I can let it slide, but I just don't prefer glitters in palettes. I like glitters to be on the side so I can use them when I see fit. Like I have a little bit of glitter with my look right now, and it was separate, and I love it. I don't know why I bought this. I did not need a monochromatic blue quad with a pressed glitter. I used this I think once or twice, and I just decided like why do I have this? I didn't even end up taking them out of the pan and keeping them as singles just because they were honestly just basic blue shades. They weren't anything special. Even the shimmer, even though I love Give Me Glow shimmers, it was just like a blue shimmer. It wasn't anything that special. Especially because I have plenty of blue shimmers in my collection. So I did end up passing this one to a friend. And I feel like when I was using it the first time, I was like, why did I buy this? And the pressed glitter was not even like my favorite pressed glitter I've ever used. It was kind of chunky and it kind of separated, and it was like a dark blue too. So I don't know, it didn't look very great. Next up, let's chat about a Juvia's Place one. I talked about a lot of Juvia's Place in the last video, and I think this might be the only one I'm talking about in this video. I think this is the only new one that got added that I'm going to talk about. This is the Nubian 2 eyeshadow palette. This one was a gift as well, and I enjoyed it like for a little while because I was collecting Juvia's Place at this time. But eventually I just decided it was mostly neutrals, clearly, with just like a pop of blue and green, and at a point I just decided Juvia's Place wasn't like my favorite quality anymore. It's not bad, but it just wasn't my favorite. I discovered other things I liked more, so I gave this one to a better home as well. This one didn't like perform horrible for me or anything. It just wasn't really inspiring me too much. I kind of got my use out of it, and then I was ready to move on. Next up, let's talk about another BH Cosmetics palette. I feel like I'm going in such a weird order today. This is the Royal Affair palette. This one was also a gift, and I was so excited about this gift because I wanted this palette, but then it wasn't available anymore, and I was so excited that I finally got to try it, and I really liked this for a long time. I love those grungy, swampy tones. I liked the pop of pink and chartreuse in here. I thought this was very fun and very cute, but But then just as my makeup collection expanded and I added more and more grungy based tones and palettes to my collection, this one just kind of kept getting pushed more and more to the sidelines because I discovered other things that had a better quality. And this wasn't bad by any means, but I just discovered things that I liked even more and that wowed me even more. So I decided this one should go to a better home as well so it could actually get more use. So I gave that one to a friend. So let's just talk about one more before we end this, and this one's like shocking that I ended up decluttering this one. This is the Menagerie Dragon Child palette. This was their palette back when they were Makeup Monsters, but I bought from them when they'd already switched to Menagerie. So this was a very old palette. I mean, not very old when I bought it, but it's an older palette at this point. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't even think all the singles exist. Some of the singles I think do exist. But this was a very fun, colorful, smoky palette. It could get very dark and very vampy, but also very colorful. I loved the tones in here. I thought this was so much fun. I got a lot of use out of this, and I was sad to end up decluttering it, but it just got to the point where the shadows were getting kind of old, and some of the shadows just weren't really performing well anymore. They were like getting very hard to show up, like they were losing their pigmentation, and they just weren't really working anymore. So it was sad to declutter this one. It wouldn't have been my first choice to declutter it, but it was just getting kind of old. It wasn't performing as well as it used to. I'm hoping that doesn't happen to my other Menagerie palettes. I'm hoping like the other ones stay good, and so far they all have, but this one just kind of took a turn, so I ended up having to declutter this one, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's a good place to stop it here. Again, I still have plenty more to talk about, so if you want me to continue this series, we can probably do another part. And at this point, my makeup collection and declutter series for this year should have already started, and I think my eyeshadow palette collection and declutter for this series, like a current collection and declutter of all my eyeshadow palettes, should be coming up soon after this video, so just stay tuned. I'm very excited about it. I love being able to declutter my collection and kind of reset for the new year. I love being able to give my friends all of my gently used makeup. It's just a good time. I think it's fun, and I like being able to kind of just breathe and feel like I have a nice curated collection again. I would love to hear your thoughts on the palettes I talked about today. Do you still have any? Did you ever want them? Did you have them? I would love to hear your thoughts. Let's chat about some palettes that you had in the past that you don't have anymore. If you made it to the end of this video, leave me an emoji that you used to use but you no longer use. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps my channel out a lot. And if you're not already, please follow me on my other socials. You can join the Baddie Bean fam. I am Baddie Bean on everything. I post every day on Instagram, and I'm pretty active on TikTok and Twitter as well. And if you want, you can subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. I'm going to be posting every single day up until Christmas. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, bye.